Alright, so we're talking about Act 3, alright? Remember, you know, Elizabeth is concerned that Abigail wants to take her spot. Abigail is accusing her because she wants to take John away. We had Cheever arresting her, and Cheever in Act 3 says John plows on Sundays. Okay, so where we left off, as the court proceedings are going on, Mary Warren starts off on their side, on John Proctor's side, but Danforth brings Abigail and Mary Warren up at the front together, and of course they both, at the beginning, say, "I'm right," and Abigail, she starts to lie. She says she feels a cold breeze, and when Danforth starts to question her, she starts going crazy, and so do all the other girls. They follow her lead and act like Mary Warren is responsible for some witchcraft, like she's sending her spirit out on them. Alright, so we have Hathorne asking Mary Warren to do something to prove she's not a witch. If it's fake, then he asks her to faint on command. Alright, now that's obviously she can't do that, okay? Mary Warren can't do that because none of us can really faint on command. So that fails, and that hurts her story a little bit. Alright, so Mary Warren starts to fade away after all the girls start accusing her, so she begins to switch sides. Remember, we talk about she starts to confess, saying that, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll never hurt you again, Abby, or I'll never hurt you more." And remember, this is the scene where Abigail, out of her infinite charity, hugs Mary Warren, and we know that that's ironic. That's an example of dramatic irony, because we as the audience know that Abigail is a terrible, lying, for lack of a better word, harlot, and she's reaching out in infinite charity. No. So remember, but the characters in the story, not all of them realize that. Okay? So, as these court proceedings are going on, we have John Proctor revealing that he had that affair. He said, there's a promise made in any bed, and I screwed up. So Abigail thinks that if Elizabeth dies, then I'm going to marry her instead, because I slept with her. So Abigail, she confesses his affair and says, Abigail's really just lying to try and get to me. She's trying to get to have me as her husband because I slept with her, and she thinks that was a promise. When in all reality, to him, it wasn't a promise, it was just a physical act. So he's confessed, and John Hale is like, "Oh, wow, I believe this man." So he starts to doubt the validity of the trials because of this confession. But the judges aren't having any of it, alright? They say, "Well, let's just bring your wife up. You said your wife will never lie. So, if your wife will never lie, we'll ask her if you had that affair or not." Of course, Elizabeth comes up, and John and Abigail are not allowed to look at her to convince her either way. And she lies for her husband. It's a natural lie, John Hale says. It's a natural lie to tell. She thinks it's saving her husband. Another example of dramatic irony. We as the audience know if she would have just said, "Yes, he cheated on me," everything would have been dropped right then and there. But because she did not know, the situation escalated greatly. So because of that, we see Giles Corey and John Proctor are arrested, because at the end of Act 3, that's the final say-so after Elizabeth tries to protect John. It's like, "Oh, okay, he was lying all along. This is all false," alright? And coupled with the fact that Mary Warren has switched sides, and all of the girls started repeating her and caused her to break, and they all started flipping out. All of this is just more and more for the judge's evidence against John Proctor and Elizabeth. So we get to so their evidence is thrown out. Remember that John Proctor and Mary Warren, they brought in a few depositions. One deposition was a deposition claiming the innocence and upright character of Martha Corey, Rebecca Nurse, and Elizabeth Proctor. That deposition was signed by 91 people, and the judges said, Judge Danforth said, well, if they're really good people, then let's just arrest them all, because obviously that's going to work, and we'll just bring them in, and if they're really upright people, they have nothing to fear. Now, Mary's deposition said that it was all a lie. Everything that she had been doing in court was a lie. And remember, Paris was concerned about that, but he was only concerned because it would have, it would have hurt him. It would have, hurt his career. It would have kept people in the town that don't like him, such as John Proctor and Giles Corey. And he's worried about people finding out about, Abigail and Betty and all those other girls dancing. So, in the end of Act 3, Abigail wins. We could say, Abigail as the villain wins Act 3 if there's a winner or loser. Because, Danforth believes her because of Elizabeth lying, so Danforth believes Abigail, not John, since Mary Warren backtracked everything, so that's another cause for Danforth to believe Abigail, and Abigail is the winner of Act 3, I guess you could say. So then that moves us right into Act 4, alright? Ezekiel Cheever, we start off Act 4 a few months after Act 3, so Corey and the Proctors have all been in jail for quite a while. And Cheever reveals, hey, I think Paris is upset because there are a bunch of cows wandering the town. Amber's like, what, cows wandering? Yeah, all the cows. Everybody doesn't know what to do with all the livestock because so many people have been arrested that nobody knows what to do with their livestock and cattle anymore. There are not enough farmers to keep them penned up, and people are fighting about them because so many people want them because that means money. So Paris comes out, and he's invited Hale because Hale has come to try and get people to confess for the right, what he believes is the right reason, the right cause. And Paris is freaking out because, Abigail has taken off. She broke into my strongbox, stole all of my money, and so her and Mercy Lewis are on a ship somewhere. I have no idea where they went. And he's freaking out about that, and the judges are concerned because that would defeat the trials, defeat the validity of them. And, Paris and Hale come out, and they are wanting them to postpone the trials. They say, if you don't postpone them, what's going to happen in Andover is going to happen here. The court's going to be overthrown, and Paris is concerned about himself. He says, I'm going to be thrown out. There's a dagger on my door. I'm probably going to die if we don't postpone these trials. Danforth says, well, we're not going to postpone them because if we postpone them, that would mean that I'm wrong. And I'm not going to let anybody think that I think I'm wrong. So he doesn't want anybody to doubt his authority. Remember that. So Hale Hale and Paris call up Elizabeth and they plead with her. Hale says, Elizabeth, it's better to lie than for your husband to die. I've decided that you know that I hate these courts now. I denounce them. Okay, I quit these courts publicly. But I cannot live with your husband dying. So please convince him to lie. Please convince him to confess to witchcraft to save his life. Now, Elizabeth says, I'll talk to him. She doesn't say, I promise anything, but she says, I'll talk to him. And we also find out in her conversation, they bring up John Proctor, and Elizabeth was actually pregnant. Okay? Now, they get to talking, and they discover, or John Proctor discovers, Giles Corey died. You know, the same way that he died in real life, the same way he died in the play. He was pressed, which means, you know, stones were put on him until he was crushed to death, essentially. And John and Elizabeth are having their conversation, and John says, you know, I've been thinking about confessing, but man, the only reason I haven't yet is because I hate Danforth, Hathorne, and Paris so much. They're such evil people, I can't bear to give them any satisfaction in confessing. And Elizabeth, she doesn't try to persuade him either way. She says, I'm not going to convince you either way. You know, I have sins of my own that I'm dealing with. It's my fault. I'm blaming myself that you had that affair. It's my fault. You know, I kept a cold house. It needs a cold wife to prompt lechery, and I was not proper. I was not loving, affectionate towards you, and I'm sorry for that. So you make whatever decision you want to make. And now John is begging her for approval. You know, he wants her to say, confess, so I can stay with you. She doesn't do that. Because if she doesn't, then she won't feel guilty about hurting his pride, you know, because she knows that deep down he doesn't want to confess. Nonetheless, in the confession, he verbally confesses to it, and he says, okay, I'll verbally confess. If it'll save my life, I'll get to see my boys and raise them and be Elizabeth's husband. I'll confess. But Danforth and Hathorne, in order to prevent what happened in Andover happening in Salem, they get John to, or they want John to sign. So he starts to sign away. All right, he's in his verbal confession. He said, "I saw the devil. I didn't see anybody with him, but I saw the devil." So they have the big long conversation about rolling other people, and John Proctor says, "I'm not going to roll anybody else. My confession's good enough." And so Danforth submits and says, okay, just sign it. And he signs it. But instead of handing it to Danforth, he says, here, I've signed it. Now, you're not going to post this publicly because I'm not going to allow my name to be signed to a lie. Because then his name is all he has left. Remember that. He's like, I'm not putting my name on a lie for everybody to see. And so it upsets Danforth, and he says, listen, if you don't give me that paper, you're still going to be hung. So he's like, okay, screw it. And he crumples the paper, rips it, tears it, and is done with it. And he dies for his confession, for not confessing. So that's pretty much the summary of what we've gone through so far, of what we've gone through in the Crucible. All right, now, here's some things to think about. Remember that Tituba and Abigail and Betty, okay, so you're going to have 4 essay responses, all right? It's going to deal with, one of them is going to deal with irony. Remember, we've talked about dramatic irony. One of them is going to deal with the characters. We've been doing a lot of character analysis. One of them is going to deal with motivations. What motivated certain characters to name other individuals, for example, or those would be technically the villains, or what motivated characters to do the right thing in the face of serious consequences. All right. So think about those things. For your short answer, you just pick one of those essay questions. You're just going to pick one, and out of 4 choices, and you're going to write 2 paragraphs. All right, make sure they're good, strong paragraphs. You're going to need at least 2 references to the text. All right, so you need 2 paragraphs, at least 1 reference per paragraph. All right, so everything that we've said here, that we've gone over, is useful for the test. All right, what I want you to do, if you have to rewatch this, do it. If you have to take notes over this. I wish you all luck, and I'm sure you guys will do just fine. Don't stress out about this. All right? So, be prepared to take this on Friday.